but also those of his businesses. Reading in part this, former executives said he also inserted himself into the business, buying a plane from the company for $10 million and trying to offer input on which woman should be Victoria's Secret models. L Brands has hired a law firm to review Epstein's role at the retail giant, a spokeswoman saying, quote, "We do not believe he was ever employed by nor served as an authorized representative of the company." And further evidence of the tight-knit 2-decade-long relationship between the two is Epstein's role as Wexner's, get this, power of attorney for 15 years, enabling Epstein to sign Wexner's checks and his tax returns. This is a guy who has a lot of money, and buy and sell properties and borrow money on his behalf. Joining me now, senior writer for the Wall Street Journal, Gregory Zuckerman, who's done extensive reporting on this. This is perplexing to me on so many levels, this sort of die-hard commitment, it seems, that existed between Epstein and Wexner. A relationship in which Wexner passed aside or put aside friends from his past, people he had long relationships with since childhood, in favor of Epstein. Talk first about Epstein's possible business involvement in L Brands.
Sure, and it's a confounding relationship that people, as you suggest, around Mr. Wexner couldn't quite figure out, and those of us trying to investigate also are having a difficult time understanding. So yeah, it started off as a business relationship. He was managing his personal finances. This is Jeffrey Epstein managing Les Wexner's personal finances, and it morphed into much more. It morphed into things like getting involved in real estate that Wexner's involved in, and even his companies, weighing in on the models at times. All kinds of personal relationships. He crafted Mr. Wexner's prenuptial agreements. It got really complicated, extensive, and a little bit, as you suggest, sort of confounding why it is that this $7 billion retail mogul had such an affinity for a guy named Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, and let's talk about this power of attorney, which is startling. I mean, the only time someone passes over their power of attorney is likely to a spouse, to a child, to a parent, someone who they trust. And even that at times is sensitive to pass over that power of attorney. New York Times saying this, Mr. Wexner signed a 3-page legal document known as a power of attorney that enabled Mr. Epstein to hire people, sign checks, buy and sell properties, borrow money, all on Mr. Wexner's behalf. Yeah. This is a giant in the business industry.
It's kind of crazy.
Wexner. This is an incredibly smart guy to have built what he built, basically beginning with the Limited brand and then going on to Victoria's Secret and what else, Abercrombie and Fitch, and yet turning over the power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein, a guy who was a math teacher at Dalton, I believe, right?
Right.
And then went on to be Bear Stearns, and no one really knows what happened to Bear Stearns and why he left. So, and also was a dropout. So why?
Yeah.
Why this commitment to Epstein?
And as you suggest, he got fired from Bear Stearns, and we wrote that today. So, right, he was a math teacher, got fired from Bear Stearns, and yet Wes Wexner, a retail mogul, kind of confides in him and gives him all this kind of power. So I would argue that a part of it, I'm not going to say this is the whole story, part of it is this guy, Les Wexner, is very skilled at certain things in life. He's a retail expert. He built these retail brands into giants from a loan from his aunt for a few $100s, but he has a weakness when it comes to finance, personal finance. It's over his head. He didn't really have anybody guiding him. His personal finances were in a mess, and he was told that this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, was this sort of financial genius by Ace Greenberg, who was running Bear Stearns at the time, we reported, and Jimmy Kane, who also was running Bear Stearns.
Ace Greenberg, the guy who eventually fired Jeffrey Epstein?
He was one of those who did fire him, right, which makes
so recommended Epstein to Wexner and then subsequently fired him, and yet Wexner stayed on with Epstein the entire time.
It's a great question. But Jeffrey Epstein is a very charismatic guy. He's a smart guy, and for whatever reason, Les Wexner decided to go all in on him and confide in him and depend on him. And if you think about it, Les Wexner is a rather shy individual. He built this brand, but he's from Columbus, Ohio. Didn't really come to New York City too much. I know people who spent time on his 300-foot yacht, and there's hardly anyone there. It's like a family guy. And here he was in a symbiotic relationship with a guy named Jeffrey Epstein, who was outgoing, charismatic, and really confident, whereas Wexner isn't.
So L Brands launching this independent probe now. What are they looking for? What could come of it?
So it'd be interesting to see how involved he really was, and the involvement goes into other things, as you kind of suggest. Epstein bought a plane, bought a home from Les Wexner.
From a low market value.
At the time, it does seem like that, yes, and it obviously.
Like, why is it bad that I mentioned a $10 million plane, right? Why is that an issue? That Epstein brought a $10 million.
Well, you want to make sure if you're a public company, you can't be selling items like a plane to the CEO's friend, buddy, at a really below market price. That could be improper.
And is there a financial record of this transaction?
There is, yeah, and also there are others that they're looking into. So this is the beginning of it, and this just shows all the tentacles that this story continues to show us, and we're all going to be investigating kind of where they extend.
And I think it's just the beginning, it seems, as to the people that are connected, as has been alleged.
Yes, I mean, Les Wexner, he could not have been, Jeff Epstein could not have been who he is without Les Wexner, but there are many others that he was involved in, and we're digging into all of them.
Gregory Zuckerman, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Great story. Coming up, we take a deeper look at President Trump's relationship with Saudi Arabia as the Senate prepares for a vote Monday on whether to override his veto on blocking arms sales to the Saudis. You're watching MSNBC.
I heard you the first time. I just wanted to hear it again.
Now available at Walmart.com. World-class rechargeable hearing aid for hundreds, not thousands of dollars, including our new app-controlled hearing aid that gives you full control of your sound environment. Try them in the comfort of your home for 60 days. Our full lineup available with free 2-day shipping now at Walmart.com.
Hearing Assist will change your life. At Arm & Hammer Foot Care, we know that shoes and gear can get smelly. Our Shoe Refresher Spray eliminates odor on contact. So bring on your shoes and gear, and you'll stay fresh with every step. Arm & Hammer Foot Care. Find us in the foot care aisle. I want hamburgers, donuts, Swiss salad.
Delivered from over 95,000 restaurants nationwide. If you want it all, you can get it all. Grubhub. Restaurants you love delivered.
It's quite the buffet at this hotel, isn't it? It really is. And so close to the stadium. I managed to book the last room for $150. I booked the last room a few months back. I booked the last room a week ago. I booked yesterday. One night, $99. What? Ow. Some hotel booking sites panic you into booking the last room, but they often don't have all the availability. Instead, use Trivago. Trivago will search for available rooms and compare hotel prices from hundreds of websites worldwide. At least I got the last ticket to the game. Me too. Hotel? Trivago.
I didn't have to shout out for help. I didn't have to get you a lift.
And I didn't have to call your wife to meet you at the doctor's. Because you didn't have another DVT. Not today. We discussed how having one blood clot puts you at risk of having another. So we chose Xarelto to help keep you protected.
Xarelto is proven to treat and reduce the risk of DVT or PE blood clots from happening again. In clinical trials, almost 98% of people did not have another DVT or PE. Don't stop taking Xarelto without talking to your doctor, as this may increase your risk of blood clots. While taking a spinal injection,
his legs aren't bad.
The risk of blood clots, which may cause paralysis to the inability to move. You may bruise more easily or take longer for bleeding to stop. Xarelto can cause serious and in rare cases fatal bleeding. It may increase your risk of bleeding if you take certain medicines. Get help right away for unexpected bleeding or unusual bruising. Do not take Xarelto if you have an artificial heart valve or abnormal bleeding. Before starting, tell your doctor about all planned medical or dental procedures and any kidney or liver problems. Enjoy every moment and help protect yourself from an unexpected one, like another DVT or PE. Are you doing enough? Ask your doctor about Xarelto. To learn more about cost and how Janssen can help, visit Xarelto.com.
My experience with USA
No, look at you, buddy.
excellent. They really appreciate USA family, and it really shows.
With all that USAA offers, why go with anybody
Fucking
else?
bitch.
You know their rates
Knock
are
on that
good.
fucking door.
They're always going to take care of us.
It was an instant savings, and I should have changed a long time ago.
It was funny because when we would call another insurance company, they would say, oh, we can't be USAA.
We're the Weber family.
We're the Tennants.
We're the Hells, and we're USAA members for life.
Get your USAA auto insurance quote today.
Good evening, everyone. Breaking news tonight.
Lester Holt,
Sounds like a shadow plane up there, but that is fire.
most trusted TV news anchor in America.
That's nightly news. I'm Lester Holt.
You're watching MSNBC.
Welcome back. Congress and the White House are set to face off again over the president's relationship with Saudi Arabia. On Monday, the Senate will try to override President Trump's veto and block the U.S. from selling more than $8 billion in weapons to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and to Jordan as well. It's not clear whether they actually even have the votes. Only a handful of Republicans backed the resolutions when they were approved in June. Not enough to garner the 2/3 majority or 67 votes needed to override a presidential veto. Now, many lawmakers, they want the Saudis to be held accountable, of course, for the conflict in Yemen and the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Joining us now to take a closer look at this, Hagar Shamali, former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations and a former Syria and Lebanon director for the National Security Council, and Michael Fuchs, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Thank you guys both for joining us. Very much appreciate it. Michael, I'm going to start with you on this one. The president's reasons for his veto include this, and I want to bring this up here. Protecting 80,000 Americans living in Saudi who he says are at risk for attacks by Houthi rebels in Yemen. He also says degrading Saudi Arabia's military preparedness and to help the Saudis stand up to Iran. We've also heard the president say over and over again it would hinder the U.S. economy because this is an $8 billion deal. What do you make of these reasons, Michael?
Well, they don't stand up to snuff, I think, here, to be frank. Look, I mean, the reality is that President Trump's decision here is shocking but not surprising. From day one, when he took office, he's been taking the side of Saudi Arabia over the side of the United States, whether it's with sharing sensitive nuclear technology information with Saudi Arabia or taking Saudi Arabia's side in the blockade of Qatar, all the way to the response to the murder of U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi and to supporting Saudi Arabia's awful war in Yemen. He's been taking Saudi Arabia's side over that, again, of the United States. So you have to ask the question here, right? Why would the United States president be doing that, and especially be doing that in the face of what rarely happens in D.C. these days, which is in the face of opposition from some in his own party? The only two potential answers I've got here really are one, financial interests. There are clear indications of his own potential financial interests. The Saudi Arabian princes and other senior officials frequently go and stay at President Trump's hotels in New York and Washington. But also there are reports of potential interests and connections between the Saudis and Jared Kushner. But the other one, I think, is this war debate we have in Washington sometimes, where anything that seems like it could be done to stand up to Iran is therefore somehow in U.S. interests.
Also talking about the U.S. economy, this is an $8 billion deal. Hagar, the gross domestic product right now standing at more than $21 trillion. $8 billion in that respect is a drop in the bucket. If we were to have vetoed this, it would not have made a huge difference to the U.S. economy.
No, and also, this is a time this is not the 1930s. We're not in the Great Depression. We don't need this sale for any reason. We don't need it to create jobs. We don't need it to make profit. If somebody else wants to fill that void, if Russia wants to go sell arms to Saudi Arabia, let them. That's fine. We have plenty of other opportunities that make sure that our values are standing. On one hand, this has to do with supporting our principles and values abroad, right? And messaging to Saudi Arabia that there are human rights abuses and that their way of conducting war is not feasible. But that second point is the most critical, right? These arms sales,
but there's not a top-down message of that. The president is vetoing this.
No, right. What's ironic is that this has bipartisan support. And I know you mentioned earlier it's not a lot of Republicans, but it's still a group of Republicans who are important, with whom the president works, like
Lindsey Graham, the president's golf buddy, being very outspoken about this.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, you know what? Selling arms has to be in line not only with U.S. values, but with our foreign policy objectives. President Obama allowed these arms to go through back in 2016 with the goal of ending the Yemen war. The strategy is not working. So fine, great, let's change it up. $8 billion, like you said, economically is a drop in the bucket, but from the standpoint of our values and foreign policy objectives, just doesn't make sense.
So, Michael, here's what the president said about the conflict in Yemen. He said the United States is very concerned about the conflict's toll on innocent civilians, working hard to bring the conflict in Yemen to an end. He goes on to say, but we cannot end it through ill-conceived and time-consuming resolutions that fail to address its root causes, and he goes on. So the U.S. is saying they want to end the conflict, but it seems as if this arms sales is only going to prolong it.
I think that's just completely ridiculous, and it's been made clear by this administration's policy for the last couple of years. They have been enhancing support, U.S. support, since they came into office for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, and they have made it abundantly clear. This is, again, not the first time that he has rejected measures from Congress to try to force his hand to stop the war in Yemen, and especially U.S. involvement in that war. This president, again, is bending over backwards to support Saudi Arabia.
Well, and of course, amidst all of this, the responsibility and the role that MBS played in the horrific murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and we have to continue to mention that. Hagar Shamali and Michael Fuchs, thank you both. Very much appreciate it. Fantastic conversation. We have breaking news, everybody, from the White House. Hans Nichols is standing by with that. Hans, what do you have for us?
Well, the president's in the Oval Office right now, and he is saying that he has reached a safe third-party agreement with the country of Guatemala, and they are signing a joint declaration inside the Oval right now. We're basing this on the pool report that's coming out. We'll get a full tape playback, but it looks like at first cut, the White House has achieved an agreement with Guatemala to allow migrants from El Salvador and Honduras to come up and apply for asylum there. The president is also going out of his way to thank Mexico for the 6,000 troops they have on their southern border. This is all part of a whole-of-government approach by the Trump administration to stop the flow of migrants, and it does look like they have some sort of agreement with Guatemala they're signing, but we've got to get all the details to you here in just a bit.
It's interesting, though, Hans, because it seems as if this is coming after the president threatened a travel ban with Guatemala.
Not just a travel ban, but also a ban on remittances, which would have been devastating to the economy in Guatemala, because Guatemala has a lot of workers here in the United States that send a lot of money back. So those threats were Tuesday, Wednesday. You remember the president of Guatemala was supposed to be here on Monday. That trip didn't happen. The White House never announced that the trip was back on, so I'll be interested to see if President Morales of Guatemala is actually in the Oval Office, because it wasn't on the president's official schedule today. It looks like this might have been last minute, and they didn't want to raise expectations. So we'll see if they have a deal and just what the exact details of that deal are. Guys.
All right, Hans Nichols, thank you so much. We're going to be following the story. I know you're going to be bringing it to us as it develops. I'm Yasmin Masugian, everybody, in for Ali Velshi. I'm going to see you right back here at 6 p.m. Eastern for The Beat with Ari Melber. It is a long day for me, but I'm loving it. Thank you for watching. You can now watch or listen to the show on SiriusXM Radio. Tune in, msnbc.com/now, the MSNBC app, and Apple TV. Deadline White House with my friend Nicole Wallace starts right now.
Aloha and namaste, everyone. I apologize to disappoint you. I am not Nicole Wallace. I am John Heilemann. It's 4 o'clock here in New York, and I am here for Miss Nicole, who's got the day off. Today, a top Democrat venturing where no top Democrat under Donald Trump has gone before. House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler suggesting today that his committee is already, in effect, conducting an impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump.
You're saying there's no difference between what you're doing now and an impeachment inquiry, correct?
It is a new development. It's a new development in the impeachment debate. His committee echoed today in writing in a court filing, in fact, that demanded more of Robert Mueller's underlying evidence from that court filing. Quote, articles of impeachment are under consideration as part of this committee's investigation, although no final determination has been made, unquote. Reporting today in the New York Times and the Washington Post says that Nadler, whose committee is responsible for recommending articles of impeachment, has gone even further behind closed doors, as the debate over how to proceed in the wake of Robert Mueller's testimony this past week intensifies among Democrats. This is from the New York Times. Quote, Nadler has gradually become convinced that his panel should proceed with impeachment hearings and do so as expeditiously as possible, though he has not stated so publicly, according to lawmakers and aides familiar with his thinking. The Washington Post adds this, quote, Nadler suggested his committee could begin drafting articles of impeachment. Nadler also argued that public sentiment was against impeachment when the House Judiciary Committee started its proceedings against President Richard Nixon in 1974 over the Watergate scandal, but support grew through the hearings. Now that posture reflected the gap between Nadler and Nancy Pelosi, who has argued that the public must support impeachment first before Democrats act. Joining us now, White House Bureau Chief of the Washington Post, the one and only Phil Rucker, the amazing former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, plus the fantastic Kimberly Atkins, senior correspondent for Boston's public news station, WBUR. And with me here at this table, Reverend Al Sharpton, the host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC, the president of the National Action Network. Amazing to see you, as always, in New York Magazine's national correspondent, the infinitely talented Gabe DeBenedetti. Guys, Rucker, I want to start with you. The whole Nadler thing today, after all of this, will there be impeachment? Will there not be impeachment? I was on television with you the night after the Mueller testimony. We both agreed that what we were hearing from Democrats was impeachment probably dead. Now you got Nadler basically saying, I'm kind of doing impeachment already. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, he's made it clear that that is under consideration. That doesn't mean there's going to be an impeachment trial on Monday, for example. There are a lot of steps that have to happen first, and we've heard Speaker Pelosi be much more cautious and judicious in her approach to this. She said, and this is her word, that the Democrats needed to be sophisticated in how they approach this, that they want to have the best hand possible if and when they move forward with impeachment proceedings. And by that, she means gathering more evidence, having more hearings. Central to this is Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, who Nadler's committee has been trying to bring forward for public testimony that remains under negotiation, but that would be a big moment for the Democrats potentially. But there are a lot of steps here still to come.
Kimberly Atkins, I want to ask you a question after I play a little bit of Nancy Pelosi here. So Pelosi is getting accused by a variety of people of sort of slow-walking impeachment. She doesn't want to do it, but she has to make sure the base thinks she's kind of open to doing it. Let's hear what she had to say in the face of that accusation.
I'm not trying to run after Paul. Let's get sophisticated about this, okay? The decision will be made in a timely fashion. This isn't endless. And when we have the best, strongest possible case.
So, Kim, talk to us about what you think Nancy Pelosi's calculations at this hour are in the wake of Mueller, now that that's over, that not seeming to have changed a lot of minds, and certainly a lot of people in the caucus still, some very adamantly for impeachment, beginning an impeachment proceeding, some very strongly against. What's the political calculus she's going through as they head into this recess?
I think she is sticking to the plan that she's had from the beginning because of that divergence in opinion within the Democratic caucus. I mean, Democrats that I talked to, both those who are who are pushing for impeachment proceedings and those who aren't quite there yet, say they understand that all of the Democrats in the caucus have different considerations with their districts coming up on what will be a very big election year. A lot of folks are in swing districts. Their base is a lot more, their constituency is a lot more moderate and may not have an appetite for impeachment, while others do. And Nancy Pelosi is trying to stay that course and walk that line and say, hey, we are working, we are doing something. But behind the scenes, I don't think that she is moved by this. I think absent some big groundswell, if there is a change in American sentiment and those folks let lawmakers know during this 6-week break that they really want impeachment, and you get dozens of lawmakers coming back, a majority of Democrats coming back and pushing for it, I just don't see where this goes. I mean, Chairman Nadler made the point that he doesn't need the word impeachment to do his investigation, and if that's the case, I think you'll see people on the other side arguing that just do the investigation and let's stop talking about impeachment.
So Joyce, I don't think we're going to stop talking about it, although it's not clear exactly what we're going to do about it. It's certainly true that Nadler is in court trying to get at this grand jury testimony that was some of the underlying evidence for the Mueller inquiry. We've got NBC News reporting that Pelosi signed off on the articles of impeachment language that was in today's court filing that I read a little bit ago. To talk to us a little bit about what Democrats have to gain potentially from trying to get that evidence and from pressing to try to get Don McGahn up there in front of Congress.
So a couple of things, John, and it's important to remember, if you divorce for a moment the legal and the political aspects of this, legally this is really a master move. Because the White House is forcing Democrats to go into court to fight for every little bit of evidence that they hope to acquire, the Democrats strengthen their hand in terms of what the law provides by being able to tell the judge, look, this is a proceeding that's precedent to a quasi-judicial hearing, which is a fancy way of saying we're investigating whether or not we should file articles of impeachment, which after all are very much like an indictment. Prosecutors don't walk into the office one day and say, let's indict. They investigate first. That's what Congress is doing. And the court now recognizes, or will likely recognize, it looks like black letter law to me,
that this gives them the ability to get information that the White House has tried to block. And Don McGahn is, I think, really the prize here. There will undoubtedly be things in the grand jury material that no one has seen before that will be of value. It's hard to assess that until one sees it. But Don McGahn is a known quantity. And if Democrats can put him up in front of Congress in, whether he's a reluctant witness or a compliant one, because they have the transcripts that Mueller has left them, they know what his testimony is, they will be able to hold him accountable if he deviates from it. And hearing the president's former White House counsel telling the story of how the president asked him to fire Bob Mueller, and then to cover it up, to lie to the press, to create fake documents to put into their official files, that has the potential to be moving in a way that the Mueller testimony, although it was substantively very informative, was not dramatic.
So, Rev, I ask you, they got this recess, right? People say, Democrats going to go home. We know what the polling says about support for an impeachment inquiry. It's not super strong. It's not overwhelming, and it doesn't seem to be moving in a dramatic way. Democrats going to go home. They're going to do town meetings. There's some parts of the country where Democrats can raise the roof by talking about how the president needs to be impeached, but a lot of places where a lot of Democrats are going to go home and they're not going to talk about this. So in the course of how we get to Labor Day and we come back and we're looking at McGahn, we're looking at some of these other things, what's the likelihood that we're going to get to Labor Day, Congress is going to come back in session, Nancy Pelosi is going to see the world through light?
I think that one of the things we have to watch is what happens with McGahn, and if something comes out over the 6-week break that Congress is going to have, that would turn some of that tide around. But there are districts that there are going to be a vociferous effort to get an impeachment proceeding going that's going to fire up some of the congressional members, that they are going to have to come back in and have to really try to light a fire, even though they may not be the majority of the caucus. Because if I were in a district that is very vehement against Trump, which some of them are, you would not want to face a town hall. You would not want to face your constituents, because just as it is difficult for those in swing states to really even risk impeachment proceedings, it's even more difficult for those in progressive or even center-left districts to justify why they're not proceeding, particularly when you have Jerry Nadler, who is not some wild-out radical saying the things that he is saying and gradually moving there. So it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people that are in the Congress.
So, Gabe, I want to ask you this. The Democrats, there was a lot of talk, and we're here at the end of Mueller week, right? A lot of Democrats said before Mueller, they said, you've read the book didn't really change public opinion, now we got to see the movie. Mueller did not want to play a starring role in some movie that was going to make this all come to life. He gave damning confirmation, reaffirmation of things that were in his report. On the substance, on the merits, it's a devastating report against Donald Trump, but it was not the movie. It was not, Independence Day. It was not, any of these some big blockbuster that changed everything. Now Democrats try to figure out, what do we do with what we got? Right. And I want to put a tweet up here, this Ted Lieu tweet. Lieu tweets this out. Analogy: Mueller gives us a slice of bread, puts ham on it, and then another slice of bread. We say that's a ham sandwich. Mueller says, I didn't make a determination whether or not it's a ham sandwich because I was instructed that I can't call it that. But it's still a ham sandwich. So that's, to me, an example of Democrats trying to figure out, how do we sharpen a message that can maybe pierce the public's lack of interest or the fog of all of this complicated legal stuff. Right. How do you think Democrats are doing in approaching that task?
Well, I think what you saw from Nadler today and what he's been talking about for the last few days is really the answer to that question. If we're going to use we saw the book, now look at the movie analogy. Well, maybe the movie wasn't a big splash, but maybe the investigative miniseries might be. So they're going to try and call more people to Congress for testimony, whether it's McGahn or other people who have worked in the White House. I think the short answer is these investigations will keep going, and they're going to hope for some sort of splashy headline here. But the reality here is that if the tide really turns, it's going to be because there's more pressure from individual members of Congress, and they're going to feel that pressure, as you've just been talking about, over the last few weeks. It's very important to note, even after the Mueller testimony, which was widely thought of as sort of a dud, at least in New York and Washington, it's not like the number of members calling for impeachment went down. It's continued ticking up, right, towards 100 now. That is a significant number, and as we've just been talking about, there's going to be more probably in the next few weeks.
Rucker, I ask you the same question basically when you hear from people on Capitol Hill, and almost as relevant when you hear from people in that bureau that you run, the people who hang out at the White House. Like, what's the message that Democrats could craft out of what is now out there in the combination of the report, the Mueller testimony, the video that exists? What's the message that Democrats are trying to craft, and to the extent that they are crafting it successfully, is the White House worried about that at all, or are they just like, hey man, we're all good now?
Well, John, the White House has been much more successful in crafting a message to the American people, which, while it's not truthful, is very simple and easy to understand. No collusion, no obstruction, total exoneration. Mueller's 6 hours of testimony in the House on Wednesday refuted that line, but it was very sort of complicated and nuanced and difficult to remember. It's not a bumper sticker, for example. And so the challenge Democrats have had in the Congress is how to communicate to the American people the urgency behind this and how to communicate what exactly Trump did wrong and what exactly they believe he should be impeached over. And one thing to keep an eye on is the emerging presidential race on the Democratic side. That's going to take center stage more and more as we head into the fall and winter of this year. And so many of those presidential candidates are calling for impeachment. It's a subject not necessarily with voters, but it has been in the debates and it has been in the media interviews that these candidates are giving. So there's this pressure coming from outside of the Congress, but within the party.
So Rucker, you sort of took us to the White House fog machine here, and just for the sake of the reality of the record, I want to put this up. This is what the fake, false, lying, grotesque BS email that the Trump campaign sent out on Mueller Day. Let's put this up and see what it says. Here it is. There it is. Here's the fog machine. Robert Mueller confirmed what we already know. No collusion, no obstruction, total exoneration. There it is. So that's what the White House, you talked about the clarity of their message. Here's the reality. Again, just to remind everyone what Bob Mueller said on those topics. Go.
The president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does. So, Joyce, I want to ask you this. Given that is, here's the White House line. It's an abject lie. Here's Mueller stating categorically that it's false. Here's all of the stuff we know. What's the big message that Democrats must get across? On top of which, I'll just add that one of the places that Mueller went in the hearings that was a little surprising to people was the extent to which he cast doubt on the president's credibility. He got as close to calling the president a fat liar as he, being Bob Mueller, could ever come when he talked about the lack of credibility that he had in comparison to other witnesses. So, taken all together, what's the message that Democrats could potentially drive that the American public really needs to hear?
I think Phil's right when he says the president does a much better job of writing bumper stickers than the Democratic Party does. But really, it's tough to take these difficult, complex issues and turn them into a bumper sticker. I guess you could say the president is a crook. But the more important line for Democrats to get across is that the president tried to preserve his own self-interest when the country was under attack from Russia. Maybe the real wisdom here that we get from Bob Mueller is Russia attacked us and the president did nothing.
Joyce, it's always great to have you here. Thank you for doing this, and we will see you on the other side of this weekend. Also, Phil Rucker, always amazing to see you. Kim Atkins, you're going to stay with us, thank God, and we'll be back to talk to you after this break, hours after Moscow Mitch, my favorite new nickname for Mitch McConnell, hours after he pulled the plug on election security, his own party blows the whistle on just how widespread Russia's attack on the last election really was. Also, on the show, a new flashpoint for Democrats just days before the next big set of debates, and the American citizen detained at the border for nearly 1 month. His unbelievable story offering a glimpse of just how bad things there are. All of these stories, all of it coming up in just a few minutes.
I had heart
problem. I was told to begin my aspirin regimen. I just didn't listen until I almost lost my life. My doctors, again, ordered me to take aspirin, and I do.
Be sure to talk to your doctor before you begin an aspirin regimen.
Listen to the doctor. Take it seriously.
I managed to book the last room for $150. Consider it. Some hotel booking sites panic you into booking the last room. Instead, use Trivago. Trivago will search for availability and compare hotel prices from hundreds of websites worldwide. Hotel Trivago.
Hi, I'm very slow with Newtek, your business solutions company. If your business needs money, whether you need 10,000 or 10 million, you can count on Newtek, the nation's largest non-bank government guaranteed lender. Newtek can help your business expand and grow. With a simple phone interview, we can pre-qualify you in just 48 hours. And with rates as low as 6%, you can see why so many businesses turn to Newtek. To see how easy getting a loan can be, contact Newtek, your business solutions company today.
I like that style.
Car shopping? Not obvious? Try CarGurus. CarGurus? It's easy to find the cars we like and compare deals. Every car is rated from great deal to overpriced. The best deals are sorted first.
CarGurus gives you deal reviews too.
Look at that model. Jinx.
Go to CarGurus today to find great deals from top-rated dealers near you.
Back on the board.
Life doesn't give you many second chances.
Look at him just.
Honestly, you can.
Okay.
Eyesight with pre-collision braking. Standard on the Subaru Ascent. The 3-row Subaru Ascent. Love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
Non-attorney spokesperson. This is a paid advertisement for legal services sponsored by Nightline Legal. Cases assigned on a random basis to participating law firms. See disclaimer for law firms. If you or a loved one were exposed to Roundup weed killer and were later diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, call right now. You may be entitled to financial compensation. Thousands of men and women in the landscaping and farming industries may have unknowingly been exposed to serious health risks when working alongside this product. Call right now. Call 800-820-4568.
Colin texts every day.
It's Colin. It'll be fine.
You looking for something?
Cause I just
Just be careful.
something's going on.
He just.
Now available with Dish on Demand.
Be sure you're on wall. Keep going.
Names for the fuck.
We're gonna need cars and guns.
Get out there.
Rated PG-13.
I want to do it right. Back on that board. Let's go. It's a problem. Simple stuff.
What a coward he is.
Simple stuff.
Donald Trump. He might not take the threat of Russian interference on our elections very seriously, but a 67-page report from the Senate Intel Committee shows that there is nothing funny about it. The bipartisan report, released just one day after Robert Mueller warned of the gravity of the threat, finds that election systems in all 50 of these United States were targeted in 4 states. The Russian government directed extensive activity beginning in at least 2014 and carrying into at least 2017 against U.S. election infrastructure at the state and local level. The report found that the Russians took advantage of the nation's decentralized voting system, quote, exploiting seams, that's exploiting, not exploding, those seams between the federal oversight and state election systems. It also found that election cybersecurity was, quote, sorely lacking in 2016, and that federal attempts to warn states about potential security breaches, quote, did not provide enough information or go to the appropriate people. Joining me here at the table, senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and former FBI Special Agent Clint Watson, a man who saw this stuff coming in real time before almost anyone, and we're going to talk about that in a second. I want to ask you, it's a great place to start, because you were so prescient about this back in 2016, and I've followed it as closely as literally any human I know. What did you learn from the Senate Intel report?
There were two parts of it that I thought haven't been talked about really. One, that Russia was trying to deploy election monitors or people to monitor polling places.
which was our fear on election night. It wasn't who was going to win, but would someone show up with a weapon at a polling place thinking the election had been stolen? That was my number one fear. What were the Russians doing there? What were these monitors doing there? Were they going to start a provocation? Were they going to claim that there was some sort of election rigging or voter fraud? They were amplifying that. The other part was the Associated Press being a central point, essentially, for the results of the election. So could the Russians actually hack into there, change the votes in between the actual voting systems and the media, such that a false report comes out, which would then create mass confusion and lead everybody to believe there's election rigging? So those two things I thought were remarkable and have really kind of gone under the table at this point.
Kimberly Atkins, I want to just toss this to you because it's one of my obsessive things. Back in 2016, I remember talking to people like Clint and others and said this second thing, you forget about whether the votes can be manipulated, whether the voting systems can be hacked. We got a lot to worry about there. But here's an easy point of entry. On the night of the election, the results start to come in. The Secretary of State of Vermont sends its report to the Associated Press. And suddenly there's an announcement that Donald Trump has won Vermont, one of the most democratic states in the country, 92%. And you've got the networks going on television saying Donald Trump apparently has won an overwhelming landslide victory in Vermont. And everyone says that's not right, that's not real. And all of a sudden you have chaos, not because the votes have been altered, but because the reporting of the votes has been altered, and that is a soft target. Can you imagine what would happen there, and why are we not more focusing on it more? And do you think the Senate report will get us to focus on it?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very real concern. It was a concern in 2016 because if you also remember at that time, Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, had already begun this messaging that if he loses, that means that the vote is rigged in some way, that there is something nefarious going on. So he was already planting the seeds in his own campaign messaging, which had some folks concerned that there would be an effort to try to deny the legitimacy of the vote. He ended up winning, and so that didn't happen, but it could happen again in 2020. There are a lot of soft spots in the election system. We focus a lot on the Senate Intelligence Committee, importantly so. But one of the things that goes on in the background on Capitol Hill all the time is there have been lots of hearings where lots of local and state people have come in and have literally begged Congress to act in order to give them the tools that they need to secure up their election systems before the election, and Congress has not acted.
I want to read this. I want to read this thing from the Washington Post here that talks about the intelligence report. The headline is "New Senate Intel Report deepens the mysteries surrounding Russian 2016 election interference." A James Homan piece. It says, "Quote: The biggest fear of the highest levels of the intelligence world expressed during multiple interviews that are quoted in the report is that Russian military officers were studying the decentralized election systems in the United States to identify the weakest links in preparation for something much more malicious and chaotic in 2020. So I ask you, Gabe, as you think about this, you think about, we've heard Bob Mueller in the hearing. They're doing it now. They're going to keep doing it. We've seen Christopher Wray in multiple public settings say, yeah, dude, like my hair's on fire. This is a 5-alarm fire. We're going to talk in a second about Moscow Mitch, but I just ask you this from what you know, and you talk to political players all the time. How worried are they, and how worried should they be?
The answer to the second question is extremely worried, more worried about this than maybe anything else when it comes to actual election day in 2020. They're all very worried about this right now, particularly Democrats talk about this a lot. The answer, though, is that they don't really know how to be worried about it because there's no obvious recourse for them to do anything here. You do have people at the state and local levels constantly asking for money, constantly asking for new policies to be put in place and for new oversight, but that's just not happening. And when you look at what's happening in the Senate, particularly with Senate Republicans, as I know we'll talk about, shutting down new election security measures, you have Democrats in particular, but political players of all stripes essentially saying, this is terrible, but we don't know what to do.
I want to turn to the Senate. I'm going to get to you right now because I know you're going to have a lot to say about this, Rev. But I want to turn to that very question now and what Republicans did this week in the face of all of this report and what Mueller said and everything else we know. The reality that despite all of that, you've got Mitch McConnell shutting down a vote on election security measures, 2 of them. It prompted, it's one of the most astonishing things I've seen. It's most irresponsible. It's not the first time McConnell's done something like this. And I want to play a little clip of my friend Joe Scarborough on Morning Joe this morning when he applied the new moniker that I think should apply to Mitch McConnell forever after. Let's play that right now.
He is aiding and abetting Vladimir Putin's ongoing attempts
to subvert American democracy, according to the Republican FBI, CIA, DNI, Intel Committee directors. All Republicans are all saying Russia is subverting American democracy, and Moscow Mitch won't even let the Senate take a vote on it. That is un-American.
Un-American? Absolutely. When you look at the fact, you've got to look at the total context. Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, and the Republicans had tried to convince the American public there was this massive voter fraud. They had people feeling that they were going to steal the election. They set the climate for what Russia could have, and in some cases actually did. So if you're going outside and people are walking by with an umbrella, even though it's not raining, you're getting ready for the rain because they took the umbrella out. They're the ones that raised the issue. Now they're the ones that's going to shut down, looking at any possibility of the fraud. They're the ones who wanted the vote ID laws, all of these requirements, and all of a sudden we don't want anything. And it happens to coincide with the Russian strategy. Some of us feel that that's a little bit too far. Clearly, they have set the table for Russians to continue to do what they want to do. And I think not only Democrats, but those of us in the civil rights and voting rights community are very concerned about it. When you have them talking about people at the polls trying to propose something, all they need is one disturbance to overturn a whole precinct's vote.
Totally.
That's extremely dangerous.
I want to add, Kimberly Atkins, I want to read to you something from the Washington Post here, a column that was written by Frida Gaitis, and ask you about what the motivation here is, because we've seen Republicans capitulate to Donald Trump, who previously did not like him, currently don't like him. But here's a thing that Ms. Gaitis wrote. Why are Republicans the party of flag huggers and fist pumping, a USA chance, throwing the gates open to America's foes? The answer is as clear as it is disturbing. That is what President Trump wants. And why does Trump want the country to lower its guard against a proven, ongoing assault by the Kremlin? Because Trump fully expects that Russian President Vladimir Putin's interference will help him win in 2020, just as it did in 2016. And I would say it's not just that he expects it, Kimberly, he's inviting it. We saw him on Stephanopoulos basically saying, Russia again, Russia, come back, do it again. And now there are other countries we know he's kind of inviting to do it too by opening the door. So there's a question in here somewhere, I promise you. But what is the deal here? Is Mitch McConnell fully in the back pocket of a totally bankrupt and corrupt Donald Trump?
Mitch McConnell, since Donald Trump has taken office, has taken the role of protecting this president at all costs. Having a Republican in the White House to McConnell is more important than anything else. We know, one, that from the moment he got into the White House, and even before, Donald Trump didn't want to talk about Russia for many reasons, one of which was it made it seem as if that cast some doubt over the legitimacy of his presidency, and he was very concerned about that, and he wanted to downplay Russia completely. Then, as you pointed out, subsequently, we've seen that message sort of shift. There wasn't, I didn't do anything wrong, nothing happened. There was, well, if it happened, it would be fine. And that was basically an invitation for foreign adversaries to engage. Again, we heard from Robert Mueller, one thing that he made very clear on Wednesday was that the efforts by Russia were meant to aid Trump.
Oh, you fucking bitch.
Where's the noise back to you and end this block with you because you're the scariest guy at the table, and it feels like we should be filled with foreboding and doom here. One of the things in the Senate Intel report is they say is, hey, as they were probing these vulnerabilities, maybe they were probing the vulnerabilities because they want to exploit them later, but maybe they just want us to know that they're probing the vulnerabilities to get psyops, right? That the notion is that if you undermine people's confidence in the system, you've done really most of your work. You don't actually have to change votes or actually get in those systems. So I wonder, whether the reason I think it's relevant is that they did so many things that were easily detectable. They didn't cover their tracks. So when you look at it, do you think there's that what's so insidious about this is that they can either manipulate the election or manipulate our faith in the election? Either way, it's a win for Russia.
It is. It's a double-edged sword, and that's what's consistent throughout it. They take a very small action, even if we, as the U.S. government, come forward and mitigate it and announce, hey, we found an intrusion and we patched it and we're taking care of it. When they've already, through that action, created some doubt. Well, how do you know? How didn't you fix it? It's 3 years now. We've been going through this for 3 years. I have no more confidence today than I did 3 years ago that we really have gotten to the bottom of it all and that we fixed all the patches. So when you look at that report yesterday, We don't go through with legislation. Honest Ads Act, election integrity. Yes, we report to the FBI when a foreign actor citizen. That is a blueprint, in fact, for any actor, foreign or domestic, to completely mess up America for 3 more years after 2020.
Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being totally certain, 0 being totally uncertain, but 10 being totally certain. In 2020, that Russia or another hostile foreign state actor will actively interfere with the American election. What's your level of certainty on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think it comes out, depends on the Democratic candidates.
What
That
the
really will change
fuck?
it, and it comes down to Russia and Iran from afar. I think the biggest fear I have is really domestic actors in 2020. Everyone is copying this. Disinformation proliferates. You're seeing duplication of the methods, and you're seeing contractors for hire in a big way, foreign and domestic, that are trying to play this game.
Well, thanks for giving me another thing to worry about. Clinton, it's great to have you here, even though you just messed up my entire weekend. After this break, Joe Biden seems to be done with the whole Mr. Nice Guy, front runner above the fray thing. He is getting tough with Kamala Harris and Cory Booker on criminal justice.
Jill has heart failure and a new place to explore. Jill has Entresto, a heart failure pill that helps keep people alive and out of the hospital. Don't take Entresto with pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or allosterone, or if you had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Ask your doctor about Entresto.
Where to next?
Your brain is an amazing thing, but as you get older, it naturally begins to change, causing a lack of sharpness or even trouble with recall. Thankfully, the breakthrough in Prevagen helps your brain and actually improves memory. The secret is an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
Exactly. Liberty Mutual
Nope,
customizes
he doesn't do it.
protections, so you'll
Doesn't
receive
do
what
it.
you need.
Nice. But, what's up with your partner?
Not again. You know, that's your reflection.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty. I managed to book the last room for $150. Beats it. Some hotel booking sites panic you into booking the last room. Instead, use Trivago. Trivago will search for availability and compare hotel prices from hundreds of websites worldwide. Hotel Trivago.
It all comes down to a single defining moment. When a plan stops being a plan and gets set.
Oh my god.
Today's
I can't be this
can
bad.
help you get there. With the people,
Nope.
tools, and
Got far back
personalized
easily.
advice to help turn your ambitions into action. What would you like the power to do?
On INSP Channel 259, it's John Wayne Movies all month long. You are right. This weekend, the Duke struggles to rein in his 2 troublemaking boys in KLUS Marshall, Saturday at 8.
Wow. He's getting worked over. He's getting worked over on this one. What worked over?
Big Chase, Sunday at 2.
No match.
Another great westerns all weekend long. Don't miss the 2 days
Everything
of
you can
summer
imagine.
like Car Shield, only on INSP Channel 259.
Okay, I'll admit I didn't keep my place as clean as I would like
Ridiculous.
because I was way too busy.
Just
Took
sick.
the time to chase around with dirt, dust, and hair. So now I use heavy-duty Swiffer sweeper and dusters. For hard-to-reach places, Duster makes it easy to clean. It captures dust in one swipe. Ha! Got it.
I can't make it.
And
Jesus
Swiffer
fucking
heavy-duty
Christ.
block away twice as much dirt.
Supposed to blow it off.
Get stuff deep in the grooves other tools can miss. You know what? My place is a lot cleaner now. Stop cleaning. Start Swiffer.
And escalation today on one of the central tensions of the 2020 Democratic primary
Oh,
fight, the battle over Joe Biden's record on race. The frontrunner is
Nope,
battling
not
back
happening.
after criticism from 2 prominent African-American candidates in that race, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. The second
Utter
set of Democratic
domination.
debates set for next week in Detroit. So Biden, Booker, and Harris will be shoulder to shoulder, literally shoulder to shoulder on stage together. Booker circled back on Biden today, extending their now several-day-long running feud over criminal justice legislation and reform. I will always speak truth to power. And watching the crime bills of the 80s and the 90s and all the things that he put into place, this is something that should be talked about. And the response to having a substantive conversation about people's records shouldn't be to go on the attack. And I found his attacks on me ridiculous. Kimberly's back, Reb's still here, Gabe's still here, all people who know a lot about the Democratic fight that's happening. I ask you, just tell me, this is now days running.
We gotta get back. He
took some hits from Harris after that debate. He saw his numbers back a little bit. We're going to talk about numbers in a minute, but he's kind of rebounded on the polling front. But he still seems to be simmering a little personally, and he's taken up after attacking Harris, attacking Booker repeatedly, and Booker's fighting back. How do you just survey it for me from the standpoint of politics? 3 days into this fight, who's winning, who's losing?
I think that right now it's pretty much going to be even going in on who's going to win. But I think that I hope it doesn't get into political cannibalism where they do Trump's work for him. But the real problem you have here is you can't raise an issue on a candidate and then not expect the candidate to be able to come back and raise issues. And I think once that door was open, they give him the license to move. He just has to be very careful how he moves on them. Because yes, 94 crime bill was an atrocity. I marched against Biden and Bill Clinton on that. Yeah. But stop and frisk, which he has charged Booker with, is a 2 or 3, 4, 5 year atrocity, which we marched on.
Does he have a real problem? Booker have a real problem?
There is some record that there's that problem there in Newark. Yeah. And the
I don't know what the fuck you're doing. Jesus
you gotta watch is if Biden hits him with stop and frisk on a Wednesday night, Bill de Blasio, who part of him winning for mayor of New York was that he would stop and frisk, is on that stage. More will come in, so this can end up very dangerous for the Democrats. And but the door was open because Biden was attacked. You can't tell a man under attack don't respond.
And dangerous, you think, for Booker?
I think dangerous for the whole party because you're going to start getting in these fights. And I think Booker can get hurt. I think that there's been problems on the left that have raised issues about Harris's record as Attorney General. It all becomes fair game. Sure. And how do people like me or others say, wait a minute, don't say that when we didn't say that when they were attacking Biden? So it's an uncomfortable position.
Kimberly Atkins, I want to ask you this, okay? So Harris fired a cannon shot at Biden in the MSNBC debates last month. We saw Biden's polls slip, as I said, but what we see this week is we got this Monmouth poll from South Carolina where Biden's got 51% support from African-American voters in South Carolina. So, he has rebounded to a large extent. So I ask you, as we head into these debates, if Biden has rebounded and he still has this very strong support among black voters, why does he need to go in on Cory Booker? Why does he need to go in on Kamala Harris if he's still in a position where he's strong with the core of the core element of the constituency that has made him the front runner? Is it not dangerous for Biden to get in this fight?
No, I think it's something he needs to do. Look, it is summertime, so polls, I think they can't measure outcomes. They can measure momentum for sure. We have seen Joe Biden largely keep his momentum, but we've seen Harris and Booker and others move forward very quickly. So that's one point. I think it's not about the candidates attacking each other, going after each other. I think it's about Joe Biden doing in this debate what he should have done in the first. Kamala Harris did go after him and scored some points and raised her profile, but she did it on his record, and he seemed taken aback. He himself said he wasn't prepared. Now what he and his team are telegraphing is that, when you come for my record this time, I'm going to be prepared and go back on your record, which is what he should have done in the first debate. I think he has to keep himself from getting knocked back. He is still the front runner by, even though it's early, because of these polls. And I think Reverend Al is right. It's not just going to be Booker and Harris. Everybody's going to be coming from them because they need to get their own profile raised. I think it's not going to be an easy thing, and Joe Biden needs to be prepared for offense and defense.
So let's get this Fox News poll up here, this national poll with the head-to-head among these top Democrats. There you got Joe Biden beating Donald Trump. This is the race. We were putting up the within the group there that had Biden way ahead. But let's look at the head-to-heads with Trump. Here you go. Biden's beaten Trump by 10 points in this race. Sanders beaten Trump by 6 points. He got Trump ahead of Warren by 1, but that's margin of error, and he got Trump ahead of Harris by 1.2. So really, in that poll game, Joe Biden, if the main thing that Joe Biden has is an appeal to Democrats in general, and especially to some communities that are central to his support, like African Americans, like I am the guy. I may not be perfect on my record on the crime bill. I may not be perfect on everything, but I've been on your side for a long time. I was Barack Obama's vice president, and I'm the likeliest guy to beat Donald Trump. And look, here's another poll. We saw a poll with him beating Trump in Ohio, a state that the Republicans have felt pretty comfortable about. So is Biden, amazingly, after all this, still in a position where he's really the dominant frontrunner on that basis, or is he more fragile than he looks?
I think he's certainly more fragile than those numbers would suggest, simply because you see all these other people going after him suggests that they see room to take from his support. But there are a number of things going on here. There's a reason that Joe Biden keeps saying, I'm the electable one, implicitly or explicitly. What he's saying here is, I'm your safe bet, Democrats, and you should vote for me for that purpose. There's also a reason that when Cory Booker started this whole thing last week and went after Joe Biden, it was on electability terms. He said, when we talk about electability, we have to talk about someone who can appeal in large ways to the African American community. And he was basically saying he wasn't sure if Joe Biden could actually do that. So you see other people saying this electability conversation is a fine one to have, but let's be very clear. It is the middle of July of the off year. No one's paying attention yet, and they're going to now.
I want to play one piece of
Put this on, bitch. What's that challenge?
Joe Biden looked like a dynamo. So when you watched Motor's performance yesterday, I think probably Biden is the one that asked him to go on. So you have him, and he's sort of a little bit leading, and then you have a whole group. You have Elizabeth Warren, formerly known as Pocahontas, and I'm sure that'll come out because that's a tough thing for her to withstand, I believe, because her whole life was a fake. She used that very, very adeptly, and it was not good. And you have Harris, and Bernie looks like he's fading. To me, Bernie looks like he missed his time.
So, Rev, here's my question. Donald Trump, has the worst poker face in America. He says what he thinks, and he also says a lot about what he doesn't say. In that group, he attacked everybody, or dismissed everybody in the top tier of the Democrats, except for Kamala Harris. There's been some reporting about Republicans looking at her with a little bit of nervousness. What do you make of that reporting? Do you think it's right that Trump omitting her suggests that he's a little afraid of her, and that the White House and that operation see her because of her prosecutorial skill and other factors as having something that they're nervous about?
No, I think it is absolutely correct. I think that when he omitted Harris, it is because they are afraid. If Kamala Harris does the top 2 or even 3 in Iowa, the electability question goes out the window. And that is what happened with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. I remember when Obama won Iowa, people that told me I was crazy for being with Obama started running over there. If she can break through just in the top 3 in Iowa, the electability question goes out of the window, and I think they know that. And if she can't just fire, that's their worst nightmare, to face this younger black woman who he can't call sleepy, he can't call Pocahontas, and who's a prosecutor. Anybody in New York knows the last thing Donald Trump wants to face is a prosecutor.
Especially true if she finishes in the top 3, and if Joe Biden does not win in Iowa, then you really get an interesting situation.
You start really getting ready to see.
All right, coming up, an American citizen detained for nearly a month at a border facility. He says the conditions there were so horrible that he considered self-deporting. That story is up next.
It makes you wonder whose interests do they have in mind? The corporations or the voters who put them into that office?
Almost 80% of Americans believe that our system has been purchased by corporations.
People who can afford free speech have free speech.
Would you guys support any form of campaign finance reform? There's always ways to make campaign finance reform better than what it is today.
What's the difference between what you're describing and money laundering?
Not a whole heck of a lot. It is one big, giant swamp.
This summer at Panera, we're going all in on the strawberries. At their ripest, we make everything better. Like our strawberry poppy seed salad and new strawberry summer caprese salad. Strawberry season is here. Panera, food as it should be.
If your adventure
keeps turning into unexpected bathroom trips. You may have overactive bladder, or OAB.
Not again. We're seeing a doctor when we get home.
Myrbetriq treats OAB symptoms of urgency, frequency, and leakage. It's the first and only OAB treatment in its class.
Myrbetriq may increase blood pressure. Tell your doctor right away if you have trouble emptying your bladder or have a low urine stream. Myrbetriq may cause serious allergic reactions like swelling of the face, lips, throat, or tongue, or trouble breathing. If experienced, stop taking and tell your doctor right away. Myrbetriq may interfere with other medicines. Tell your doctor if you have liver or kidney problems. Common side effects include increased blood pressure, common cold or flu symptoms, sinus irritation, dry mouth, urinary tract infection, bladder inflammation, back or joint pain, constipation, dizziness, and headache.
Looking for a destination that isn't always the bathroom? Ask your doctor if Myrbetriq is right for you and visit Myrbetriq.com.
I managed to book the last room for $150. Some hotel booking sites panic you into booking the last room. Instead, use Trivago. Trivago will search for availability and compare hotel prices from hundreds of websites worldwide. Hotel Trivago.
Does that stuff really work? Oh yeah. It's like the credit Sesame food. What does getting your free credit score have to do with plant food? Credit Sesame is so much more than just a free credit score. Credit Sesame gives you all the tools you need to really grow your credit score, so you can get the things you want, like a new house or a car. Wow, that's some powerful stuff. The plant food? No, Credit Sesame.
What do I do?
Download Credit Sesame for free today.
What do I fucking do?
Fact is, every insurance company hopes you drive safely. But Allstate actually helps you drive safely with DriveWise. It lets you know when you go too fast or brake too hard. With feedback to help you drive safer. It gives you the power to actually lower your cost. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about that. Now that you know the truth, are you in good hands?
We have a new low at the U.S.-Mexican border. An American-born teenager was held for weeks at a detention facility in Texas. Here's what the 18-year-old told the Dallas Morning News about the horrors he experienced. Francisco Irwin Galicia, Dallas-born U.S. citizen, spent 23 days in the custody of U.S. Customs and Border Protection in conditions that made him so desperate he almost opted to self-deport. Galicia says he lost 26 pounds during that time because officers didn't provide him with enough food. He said he wasn't allowed to shower and his skin was dry and dirty. He and 60 other men were crammed into an overcrowded holding area where they slept on the floor and were given only aluminum foil blankets. What he said, some men had to sleep on the restroom area floor. Joining in this conversation, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Elliot Williams. Elliot, how do we get here?
Okay, well, there's two big problems here. Number one, none of the facilities that are there at the border are designed for the amount of volume they're having now, because we haven't addressed this as the hemisphere-wide humanitarian crisis that it is, right? So there's that problem set by that. The second big problem is, what does citizenship mean? If a young man who has a copy of his driver's license in his pocket, a copy of his birth certificate in his pocket at the time he's apprehended. If his mother produces a copy of his birth certificate at the time he's in detention, yet still the Border Patrol officers were not believing his claims to U.S. citizenship. Citizenship, it's frankly something quite sacred, John, and I think even recognizing that agents and officers have a job to do at the border, they have to make hard decisions. But at a certain point, we need to take seriously claims when an individual claims he's a citizen of the United States. And that just didn't happen here. And this natural-born U.S. citizen was just not treated properly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not this. We hear about the squalid conditions down in the border a lot, Elliot. We do not hear stories of this kind of treatment of American citizens all that often. I'll say something else we don't hear that often. There's stories about U.S. active duty troops now just feet away from migrants in Texas. Here's an NBC News quote I want to read to you here, okay? Active duty U.S. troops are now stationed inside the Border Patrol's holding facility in Donna, Texas, and monitoring migrant adults and children from just a few feet away. According to 2 current and 2 former defense officials, the troops were assigned to the facility to provide welfare checks on the migrants, but the officials say that has evolved into a continual presence watching over them. I don't like to use Latin on television, Elliot, but I believe, isn't there some principle, like posse comitatus? There's some issue, right, about the deployment of U.S. troops for these kind of purposes. Is this not either a violation of law or something pretty close?
Sure, but look, I'm a lawyer. You can use all the Latin you want, John. But look, this gets back to the fundamental question. In the United States, we regard immigration as a public safety matter and not an economic matter or a humanitarian matter or a human matter. So think about who's having the conversation now in the country or in government. You see the president, you see the Secretary of Homeland Security out speaking, but where is the humanitarian community? Where are the people who, frankly, can address the public corruption in Guatemala and El Salvador that can fix this? But at the end of the day, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and when you treat immigrants and migrants exclusively as threats to American public safety, yes, you're going to end up with military at the border guarding little kids who are in cages. So this requires a fundamental reshaping and rethinking how we think of and treat immigration in the United States, and we're just off base here.
Let me ask you one last question, Elliot, to stick with your specialty here before we have to let you go. We got some Senate Democrats who went down there and then checked out the situation. They're coming back. Anybody who tours down there comes back and says, we got to have changes here. Political pressure coming from Senate Democrats in a Senate controlled by Republicans, and specifically Mitch McConnell. How likely is that to actually affect change?
I don't think it is, because again, when this started with using the separation of children from their parents as a deterrent, as a deliberate choice made by the government, it'll be very hard to see how deliberate change will come. Now, the Democrats were very smart because they asked for very basic and fundamental needs. If you read their letter, they're talking about lights being turned off at night so kids can sleep. They're quite basic needs, and so it'll be interesting to see how Republicans in the Senate respond to those requests.
Elliot Williams, always a pleasure, not a pleasurable topic, but a pleasure to have you on television because you're so smart. Thanks for doing this. After the break, a story straight out of a Mad Libs book, Donald Trump's quest to free an American rapper from jail in Sweden. Next.
If you live with diabetes, why fingerstick when you can scan? With the Freestyle Libre 14-day system, just scan the sensor with your reader, iPhone, or Android, and manage your diabetes. With the Freestyle Libre 14-day system, a continuous glucose monitor, you can check your glucose levels anytime without fingersticks. Ask your doctor to write a prescription for the Freestyle Libre 14-day system. You can do it without fingersticks. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
This was me before Liberty Mutual customized my car insurance, so I only pay for what I need.
And this is me now.
Any physical changes to this man's appearance are purely coincidental.
Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Family Taco Night is a heartburn night you can plan for. But surprise pizza at the office beats heartburn you didn't expect. Zantac works when you need it. It relieves or prevents heartburn in as little as 30 minutes and lasts up to 12 hours. Zantac. Eat your way, treat your way.
Hi, I'm Joan London. Today's senior living communities have never been better, with amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And there's never been an easier way to get great advice. A Place for Mom is a free service that pairs you with a local advisor to help you sort through your options and find the perfect place. A Place for Mom. You know your family, we know senior living. Together we'll make the right choice.
When the hot sun hits your ice cream, lick fast, like a cookie dough ninja. Apply that same speed to the floor, hurry up and save some. For the first time ever, get 20% estimated savings on select Ford models. Plus, complimentary maintenance through Ford Pass Rewards. It all adds up. Don't you love math? So get here ASAP, because tasty deals in summer go fast. Get in or lose out on 20% estimated savings on select Ford models. Plus, earn complimentary maintenance through Ford Pass Rewards.
Number 472. You should be mad at airports. You should be mad at non-season travelers. And you should be mad at people who take unnecessary risks. But you're not mad, because you have E-Trade. This tech helps you understand the risk and reward potential on an options trade. And even explore what-if scenarios. Don't get mad. Get E-Trade and start trading today.
I
heart disease. Watch what I eat. Take statins. And still struggle to lower my LDL bad cholesterol, which means a heart attack or stroke can strike without warning, pulling me away from everything that matters most. Because with high bad cholesterol, my risk of a heart attack or stroke is real. Repatha plus a statin seriously lowers bad cholesterol by 63%. And significantly drops my risk of having a heart attack or stroke.
Do not take Repatha if you are allergic to it. Repatha can cause serious allergic reactions. Signs include trouble breathing or swallowing of the face. Most common side effects include runny nose, sore throat, common cold symptoms, flu or flu-like symptoms, back pain, high blood sugar, and redness, pain, or bruising at the injection site.
I won't let a heart attack or stroke come between me and everything I love. Tell your doctor to lower your LDL and reduce your risk with Repatha. Pay no more than $5 per month with a Repatha copay card.
Yeah.
It's one of those headlines that would have sounded made up just 5 years ago. The President of the United States is attacking the country of Sweden, demanding the release of American rapper A$AP Rocky. The Grammy-nominated artist has been detained there for nearly a month following a brawl in Stockholm, a charge that he denies. Here we have Donald Trump. Donald Trump tweeting, quote, "Give A$AP Rocky his freedom. We do so much for Sweden, but it doesn't seem to work the other way around. Sweden should focus on its real crime problem. Hashtag free Rocky." Kimberly Atkins, I ask you, like, what is to be said and made of this?
All I could make of it was in another tweet that he tweeted about this, he said that Sweden was letting the African American community down. I've yet to hear any black voter put A$AP Rocky at the top of their list of concerns. I'm waiting for the tweet for the president to say he's going to get to the bottom of how an American teen had his 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendment rights violated by being detained, even though he had his birth certificate on him. I think that's probably a better place for the president to put his attention.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure it's true. But I want to say to you, Sharpton, here's the thing. The president has done one thing that the left thinks is good: the criminal justice reform. That's the act they passed, that Kushner is spearheaded. People like that. You know, it's the one credit he's gotten. And yet, this week we got Bill Barr reinstituting the federal death penalty, while the president is also apparently trying to play racial politics of some kind with this A$AP Rocky thing. Like, what do you think? The conflicts are so intense that I can't figure out what he's thinking, even if from the standpoint of his manipulative political mind. What's the calculation?
Well, I think the calculation is he, first of all, is responding to requests by Kim Kardashian and Kanye, because some of us had said this was unjust, and his mother, A$AP Rocky's mother, had come up with a rally with us weeks before this. And I think that what the president is doing is trying to score that to look like he's balanced, when clearly a lot of independent voters are talking about his racism. Because I think he's right. Why would he make this something for the African American community? For him to specifically say that, even when he's trying to be more, let's say, expansive, he still has to segregate the concerns and make him an African American.
Here's the score. On one side, free A$AP Rocky with the dollar sign in the tweet. On the other side, we're reinstituting the federal death penalty.
The same week.
That makes a lot of sense in the same week. Donald Trump, what a genius. My thanks to Kimberly Atkins, Rev Al. Always fun to be here with you, and Gabe Benedetti. You guys are great. That does it for this hour. I'm John Heilman. I was here for Nicole. I'll be here on Monday for Nicole, too. MTP Daily starts with Chuck Todd right now.
If it's Friday, more Democrats call for an impeachment inquiry, as the Judiciary Committee chairman claims, in effect, that an inquiry is already underway. Plus Russia, if you're listening, as Democrats wring their hands over the impeachment question after Mueller's testimony, as the Republican Party washed its hands on the issue of protecting the American democracy. And Biden bounces back. New numbers show he's clearly the frontrunner in the Democratic race. First debate? What first debate? If it's Friday, welcome to Meet the Press Daily. Good evening. I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. We've got a big show for you tonight, because we're not ever going to bring little shows. That's outrageous. More Democrats are calling for impeachment, but Speaker Pelosi today again made it clear she still is not one of them. She was defiant
rejecting claims she's trying to run out the clock on the idea of starting an inquiry. All as the Judiciary Committee Chairman, Nadler, today danced around the issue during a press conference. One of his Democratic colleagues at that press conference did not, flat out calling their work an impeachment investigation. We're going to speak with that very member in just a moment. But folks, we're going to begin tonight with the whole reason why Democrats are wringing their hands on this impeachment question in the first place. Because the Republicans have made it clear they're going to acquit this president despite whatever evidence shows up, including substantial evidence of misconduct involving Russia's attacks on our democracy, let alone odd behavior regarding Russian foreign policy with Turkey, for instance. In fact, Republicans have largely washed their hands of Russian interference in the president's misconduct completely. There's nearly no outrage these days over Russia's sweeping and systemic attack on our democracy, or the president welcoming those attacks, even inviting them to happen again, or the president trying to obstruct the investigation into those attacks. It is a staggering reversal from the rhetoric we saw, and it was just rhetoric at the time, but it was still rhetoric that we saw from Republican leaders and members of the rank and file, when at that time they publicly made it seem as if the Republican Party was going to take the interference question seriously.
They need to pay a price, and I don't care what their motives were. We're going to give President Trump an opportunity to make Russia pay a price for interfering in our elections so it will deter others in the future.
It is absolutely unacceptable that Russia or any other country but Russia meddle in our elections. This is period right there.
Well, let me just speak for myself. The Russians are not our friends.
One of the biggest problems over the past year is the president referring to anything Russian as a hoax. And it wasn't. Russia did try to intervene in our elections.
Now, I think the newest quote that we showed you there was from January 2018. Now, compare those reactions to what we heard from Republicans when they questioned former Special Counsel Bob Mueller this week on his report that documented Russian interference.
There is collusion in plain sight. Collusion between Russia and the Democratic Party.
When did you first learn of Peter Strzok's animus toward Donald Trump?
Maybe a better course of action is to figure out how the false accusation started. That's exactly what Bill Barr's doing. And thank goodness for that.
Is the Inspector General report correct that the text messages from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page's phones from your office were not retained after they left the special counsel's office?
I want to find out if Russia interfered with our election by providing false information through sources to Christopher Steele about a Trump conspiracy that you determined didn't exist.
Let's be honest here. This begs a very uncomfortable question. Is the reason why Republicans, or at least the elected ones, are no longer outraged, or at least the president, is because Russia helped the Republicans win? Joining me now is someone who knows a thing or two about the effects of the GOP's embrace of Trump. It's former South Carolina Republican Congressman Mark Sanford, who was often critical of the president. It cost him his seat in Congress, and he's now considering challenging President Trump for the GOP nomination in 2020, largely on the issue of basically trying to create a debate inside the Republican Party of what the heck does conservative mean. And we could delve into that. But Congressman Sanford, I want to start with this issue of how did we go from two...
I'd love to.
I know you would. I know, and I hope we get to see a debate between you and the president on this issue. I really do. I think it's important for the Republican Party to see that debate. But explain to me why we went from a Republican Party in Congress that in 2017 rhetorically seemed concerned about Russian interference to the Republican Party of 2019 that says, you know what, and I'm washing my hands here, Congressman Sanford, we're out. Whatever Trump says goes.
The short answer is one of baseline politics, which is that, parties circle the wagons. And the party in a rather unusual way circled the wagon around President Trump since he's been in office over the past 2 years. He has a forceful personality, and the sun, moon, and stars seem to orbit around him, at least within Republican office holder level politics. And so we are where we are based on politics. That's a simple answer.
It does seem to be alarming that, this week we had the Mueller testimony, we had the Senate intelligence report, but we had another incident this week that to me should actually raise more alarm bells, and that is the president seems to be standing alone in the Republican Party. Even today, on wanting to punish Turkey, a NATO member, for essentially going to Russia for military help.
And
I'll put
here the
mustard in
United
your
States would like to
burgers.
sanction Turkey, and
You all right?
President Trump is
Yeah.
begging them not to.
All right.
Look, I'm not saying there's a direct line here, but how does these dots not get put together and at least raise an alarm bell or two?
Well, I don't know that they don't. There are a lot of conversations out there, but I think that right now you have disequilibrium, let me say that in English, disequilibrium in terms of the debate format. And so if you take, for instance, the Mueller testimony of the other day, Democrats had, in essence, to charge the Hill. They had to try and prove obstruction or conspiracy of some sort, which is a tougher rhetorical debate to get your arms around, particularly if you have a witness that's not going to lead you in that direction. Republicans had the high part of the hill, which is they just wanted to question process. So I called a friend on the way over here. I said, "Give me your take of the Mueller, report and hearing the other day." His point was, what it told me was that Mueller was not really in charge. And it raised for me a whole list of different conspiracy questions as to who's really in charge. So I think it's just a disequilibrium in terms of debate, and Republicans in some ways have the high ground in being able to, in essence, hold off the impeachment charge or the bigger question of collusion and obstruction.
I guess, though, it seems to me that it's more of the actions. I go back to, you're sitting there, okay, maybe we don't know if it was conspiracy here or conspiracy there, but there are things that are facts. The Russian government broke into the DNC. Those emails got leaked out to do, I don't get why there isn't.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just giving you the response.
No, I understand that.
A Republican stalwart, who I call, just to get us through the picture reading on the way over.
Well, I guess the other way that sort of, to me, is an odd. You and I both know how this town works sometimes. President Trump, imagine if he just said, you know what, boy, I'm Mitch McConnell, whatever election interference, send me those bills, I'll sign them. He'd get bipartisan praise and all this. This would be an easy layup for him. But he doesn't want to do it. And so you can't help but ask yourself, why doesn't he want to sign these bipartisan supported bills that would actually put in new safeguards to prevent cyber intrusions?
Well, there may be more policy legitimacy on that one. And that if you look at, the 2018 bill that I think had another tranche of about $300 million or so that hasn't been spent, there's money in existing state accounts that hasn't been spent. In some states, to your point, there are real shortfalls and they need extra cash. But, this is another example of the left arm not knowing what the right arm's doing in government, because in the wake of the 2000 election cycle, what we saw was a $3 billion bill that moved us from paper ballot to electronic ballot. Now folks are saying we need to move back to paper. And I think there is some warrant and concern on the Republican side saying, well, what are we doing here?
Well, all right, that transitions me to another part of your candidacy, of what could be your candidacy. I know you haven't made a decision. Why should any viewer right now believe any Republican that ever tells them they care about the debt deficit?
They got a good point. You got me on that one. Because I think Republicans have lost unbelievable, if not all, credibility on the debt deficit and spending issue. Which is to say, we need to have a conversation within the Republican Party about what we believe on that front. Because there's been incredible erosion as to people's belief in the Republican Party in being a financial stalwart.
Do you worry that there is no Republican Party room for an ideological debate because it's not the Republican Party anymore, it's Trump's party?
I think that's a legitimate question, but here's what I know. I literally, over the time of my time in office, whether in the governorship or in Congress on 2 different stints, I've had thousands upon thousands of different conversations with people at the grassroots level, and these people haven't gone away. They're still there. To John Boehner's point, I don't know where the Republican Party is. It's all somewhere out there sleeping. But those people still exist at the grassroots level, and it is unfathomable to me, even if they're not served by elected office holders, that those beliefs that they talked about over all those years that I've been involved in politics are not still there, whether for the small business person struggling to make it, or whether for the family sitting around the kitchen counter trying to balance their budget.
Well, I think one of the other problems is voters don't care about the deficit enough. I think that's another thing people are finding out. Voters Mullers don't care. You spend other people's money.
Yeah, but you know, the people right before they're diagnosed with cancer don't care that much about going to the doctor either. But all of a sudden, when they get the real word from the doctor that says, wait a minute, you may be feeling okay right now, but there's a profound problem within you that you got to deal with. I think that's where, whether it's the president or other elected office holders in D.C., have totally done a disservice to the American public by not honestly diagnosing what's going on within our nation's finances.
Congressman Sanford, you now know long-term thinking is something that doesn't exist here in Washington, D.C. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views. Stay safe on the trail, sir. When are you going to make an announcement? When will you make an announcement?
Well, no, I haven't made an announcement, and I decided to make an announcement. I said I'm going to give it a 30-day look in terms of deciding go versus no go.
All right, well, we'll touch base on Labor Day. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good talk. Yes, sir. Now, on the topic of Russia's attacks on our democracy, who better to talk to than one of the victims of the attacks, John Podesta. He was the chairman of the Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign, where he was targeted personally in the Russian interference campaign. He's founder and director of the Center for American Progress. Mr. Podesta, thanks for coming on. Good to talk to you.
Good to see you, Joe.
Let me just ask a personal question. I'm watching the Mueller testimony and reading the Mueller report. How satisfied do you feel as if the government has done enough investigating on what happened?
Well, look, I think Mueller did a professional job, and I think he demonstrated that in the hearings. When you think about it, what he laid out was the fact that there was a sustained major attack by the Russian Federation and Vladimir Putin against the United States democracy, that Donald Trump welcomed it, that his campaign encouraged it, that there were certainly a number of contacts between the campaign, 272 contacts, and then Donald Trump tried to cover that up with what most people would look at as obstruction. And I think when you look at all of that, you have to ask yourself, how can we be where we are, where the Republicans thought that was a good day for them? That Mueller's testimony showing the unpatriotic approach that Trump took during the election and the continuous attempts to encourage the Russians to do more. Mitch McConnell's decision to block election integrity legislation on the Senate floor, not even give it a vote. I mean, it's a sad day for the United States.
You're outlining some circumstantial actions that I don't understand. They don't raise at least yellow flag. The Turkey decision, the not even wanting what would be, you and I both know how this town works, an easy layup of bipartisan legislation that he would sign, that he would get all this, fake, maybe phony praise for a day, but from leaders on the Hill. But he doesn't even want to do that.
Well, I think there's a reason for that, which is I think he thinks it helped him in 2016, and he's hoping it'll help him again in 2020. He at the G20, he yucked it up with Vladimir Putin, sort of mock scolded him about not interfering with the election. But I think they're hoping for a repeat, that they don't want to do anything that would impede Russia's attempts to put their thumb on the scale and really kind of undermine not just the results of the election, but Americans' views about the integrity of the democratic process.
There's another report that came out this week that I think would have gotten a lot more attention had they put it out the day before Mueller's testimony than putting it out the day after Mueller's testimony, but we can debate that later. And that is the Senate, part one of the Senate intelligence investigation into Russian interference. This is an investigation, I know you sat down for an interview. I don't know how much of it you've gotten through, but what you've seen, what do you make of their investigation so far and of their results?
Well, it was sobering, I think, because it showed that we knew that the Russians had penetrated certain state electoral bases and electoral institutions. Not only they went after 50 states, they were thinking about putting election monitors out in the field for God knows what reason. A lot of it's redacted, even surprisingly, even the recommendations.
So much of it, it's overly redacted.
I'm not sure how states are supposed to implement the recommendations if they're classified. But put that aside, I think they really demonstrated that the Russians had a full-on assault. We don't know what they did, whether they had altered any results. The Senate committee certainly said they couldn't prove that they actually altered any results. But it gives more, I think, push for more protection of our election systems, and yet what you have is Mitch McConnell blocking it. I think your colleague Joe Scarborough, who dubbed it Moscow Mitch this morning, it was well taken in doing that. They don't seem to care, and the only conclusion I think one can draw is they're hoping it happens all over again.
I'm curious. Look, hindsight is very much 2020. But as you read that investigation and saw the picture that the Senate Intel Committee was able to paint in those earlier days of 14, 15, 16, in 2016 and 2015, obviously more should have or could have been done. What is one thing you think should have been done in 2016 that wasn't?
Well, look, I think that one of the things that was a problem in 2016, obviously the security around the election, that was obviously an issue. The Russian interference really came to the fore in June, right before the Democratic convention, when we understood that the DNC servers had been attacked. But I think one thing that, if you look backwards, because this all took place in the government's knowledge of what the Russians were up to, took place in classified channels, I think that they were unable really to put before the American people what the real challenge to the American democracy was. They're unable to kind of brief the people who really needed to know, including at the state level, in the campaigns, etc. And I think that's got to change. There's got to be a way, when the U.S. government knows as much as it did in the summer of 2016, for them to be able to put that out in front of the American public.
This Senate report is so sobering. 14 states basically can't guarantee that any sort of backup system going into 2020. Either parts of the state because of the county level or the state completely. I have to tell you, in a very close election, based on what the Senate Intelligence Committee found, a candidate is going to challenge, and they're going to have some grounds to question some of the way the results, perhaps just because we don't have any safe here.
Well, that's why it's so critical that we move forward with this election protection legislation, and that states adopt paper ballot ballots or paper ballot backup systems, and that we have audits after the election. We saw that in November and December of 2016, when certain states there was no way really to go back and take a fair look at whether of the election results had been manipulated. That shouldn't happen again in 2020. We know so much more today. And we have the tools and the ability to do it. We just need to spend the money to make sure that those machines are protected and the systems are done in a way that they can be accurately counted.
And one more thing, political will on both sides of the aisle, not just one.
Well, you can't have one party resisting change because they think it benefits them to be on the side of a foreign adversary.
Yeah, and all you do is invite more foreign adversaries to do it that way. John Podesta,
Mr. Mueller pointed that out.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your views. I know it's weird because this is so personal for you, but I appreciate it. Thanks very much. Okay. Up ahead, inquiring about impeachment inquiries as Democrats make a move to get Mueller's secret documents. Plus, we heard loud warnings this week from Mueller about Russia's ongoing election interference and the deafening silence from nearly all elected Republicans. Our experts will weigh in on all of today's and this week's developments. That's next.
Jeep Range. Freedom to do it all.
Your insurance rates are probably going to double.
But Dad, you've got...
Allstate, but that's them forgetting. They guarantee your rates won't go up just because of an accident.
Smart kid.
Indeed. Are you in good hands?
When you need the fuel to be your nephew's #1 fan, Holiday Inn Express. We're there, so you can be too.
We use Angie's List because we can always find great local pros.
For any type of home project.
I use Angie's List because it's free.
Free to read reviews.
Check their ratings. They can even match my project to qualified pros.
Go to angieslist.com today.
This is the Irish model organizer.
Greenhouse Kitchen.
I will wipe you off the face of the earth.
This isn't gonna stop. We worked hard for this.
The kitchen, rated R magazine.
Maria Ramirez?
Hi.
Maria Ramirez.
McDonald's is committing $150 million in tuition assistance, education, and career advising programs to help more employees achieve their dreams.
This is my body proof.
Proof of less joint pain.
And clearer skin.
Proof that I can fight psoriatic arthritis.
With Humira.
Humira targets and blocks a specific source of inflammation that contributes to both joint and skin symptoms. It's proven to help relieve pain, stop further irreversible joint damage, and clear skin in many adults. Humira is the #1 prescribed biologic for psoriatic arthritis.
Humira can lower your ability to fight infections. Serious and sometimes fatal infections, including tuberculosis and cancers, including lymphoma, have happened, as have blood, liver, and nervous system problems, serious allergic reactions, and new or worsening heart failure. Tell your doctor if you've been to areas where certain fungal infections are common, and if you've had TB, hepatitis B, are prone to infections, or have flu-like symptoms or sores. Don't start Humira if you have an infection.
Ask your rheumatologist about Humira.
Go to mypsaproof.com to see proof in action.
You say there's no difference between what they're doing now and impeachment inquiry, correct?
In effect. Okay, welcome back. That was House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler today, after announcing his panel is asking a federal judge to unseal grand jury evidence from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, and that articles of impeachment are under consideration. So Nadler's self-described escalation of the Democratic Party's inquiry came just after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi denied that she was trying to run out the clock on impeachment.
We won't proceed when we have what we need to proceed, not one day sooner. And everybody has the liberty and the luxury to espouse their own position and to criticize me for trying to go down the path in the most determined, positive way.
Meanwhile, the number of Democrats supporting opening an impeachment inquiry is ticking up. It is now at 97, but that is still not at half the Democratic caucus. Let's bring in some of our experts tonight. Bill Kristol, founding director of Defending Democracy Together, Juana Summers, national political reporter for the Associated Press, Howard Fineman, an MSNBC political analyst. Juana, let me start with you. There is an actual difference between what they're calling an impeachment investigation and inquiry. It's the difference between being treated like a grand jury and having the powers of a grand jury versus not. So there's a real difference here. What do you make of the need by Nadler to change the rhetorical difference?
I think this is really interesting, particularly as you note the timing coming on the heels of Nancy Pelosi saying, as she has been saying for weeks and weeks now, that she's going down this fact pattern, that she's going to continue to do this fact-finding process and investigate. I think that that's a little bit of throwing some catnip to the impeachment-hungry folks out there in the base. When I travel the country talking to these Democratic candidates, I'm struck by the number of people who want to know why Congress isn't taking this step yet. I think that Nadler may be hoping to quiet some of the folks within the caucus who are really hungry to see them do something with a few more teeth to it.
Do we at all think that maybe the potential primary challenge that Nadler may receive from the left has a little something to do with this?
Absolutely. The politics certainly have to be a part of that calculus. There's no way he's not thinking about that, to at least not hear it.
Howard, this feels like, I think we're going to end up in a place where we'll never see an article of impeachment, but we will see the inquiry. What's your, look, I think the next 6 weeks will tell us.
Right after Mueller finished, I was tempted to say, but didn't quite say, that I think this is about it for impeachment, because they didn't get the boost that they wanted out of that thing. But the more I talk to Democrats in the days since, and even just now, I went to one of my home bases, Western Pennsylvania, to talk to my Democratic sources out there. Even the ones who know all about those purple swing districts in Western PA, I didn't sense that they were saying, "Oh no, don't you dare do this." They're almost, personally they think, and substantively they think, that this president should be impeached. There's that. Okay, substance does matter. Politically, they're saying it wouldn't kill us. Would it help us in those swing districts, those real swing districts? Not necessarily, but they didn't say to me, it'll kill us, which makes me think that to some extent the pro-impeachment people are pushing a little bit against an open door. And the fact that Jerry Nadler has a primary challenger, that's happening all over New York, by the way.
Yes, it is.
And that's real.
Hey, Bill Kristol, I think one of the most interesting quotes I read today came from Andrew Sullivan, he's very frustrated that Democrats haven't started an inquiry. And he notes, he goes, and he was talking about the debate between AOC and Pelosi, and he goes, "It's as if we have to choose between craven cowards who have a grip on how to win the House and refreshing radicals who know how to lose it." It was just it was an interesting way that he framed it, but this goes to, there is a mushiness here by the leadership that if the shoes were on the other foot, is there any doubt at this table or anywhere that the Republicans would have started, no matter how unpopular impeachment was, Republicans in a reverse position would have already begun the inquiry?
Look, I feel like the Nadler's talking, it's like the inquiry formerly known as impeachment. Now it's like, can't call it that, but it's sort of that. For legal purposes, we want it to be that so we can get some.
It's the inquiry to see if they'll have impeachment.
I'm sending it because in some purple district, someone's going to have a heart attack because I don't believe that for a minute. And what the problem is, and the problem is they didn't look. They haven't learned anything new, and they're not going to learn much new. What was needed? Nancy Pelosi said in the clip you showed, what we're proceeding to learn what we need to learn what we need to know to proceed.
Yeah.
The day after Mueller's report was released, they knew what they needed to know to proceed. I think they should have proceeded to an impeachment inquiry. If they didn't think it was sufficient, it's not going to turn out to be sufficient based on anything they're learning. They can subpoena everything they want. They can have Dominic Gant testify. Guess what? He's going to tell the House committee the same thing he told Robert Mueller.
Right.
No one has challenged anything in the Mueller report.
No
one has. There's a single fact, a single quotation, a single description of an event. So either that's impeachable or it's not. So I think they I have a high regard for Nancy Pelosi. I know the many considerations she had to weigh, but I think it was a big mistake not to go ahead and at least have the inquiry and then decide, okay, maybe you don't quite hit impeachment, maybe you censure.
That's what I don't understand.
They do have, this is Andrew Sullivan, they got the worst of both worlds now, in a sense. They've got a lot of people upset,
right?
And then but they're not really building a case either.
No, there is this weird fear, Juana, that they seem to have. And yet, there is this, none of them are thinking about what this is going to look like in 3 years. It's almost like they're only worried about what this is going to look like in the next iteration of the poll back in November 2020.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think to some degree there's this big fear out there when I talk to Democratic strategists of what if we go down this road and we don't come out prevailing here. And I think that risk is kind of what's animating a lot of these folks who aren't necessarily going down the full war path of let's get this thing going, let's start for impeachment. They're worried that it gives the president this slam dunk, this ability to walk around and to say, you guys tried this and it didn't work. I think that is a
and he says you didn't even have the nerve to try it. I think right now they're setting themselves up for Bob Mueller delivered a report that didn't do any damage to me, and the House of Representatives elected allegedly to check Donald Trump. The Speaker Pelosi, the most powerful and capable Democrat in Washington,
rant for about a month
they
now.
didn't do anything. But I think he was setting Trump up to declare that he's vindicated in January.
What's the use of having the power if you don't use it, number one? And I think that to some extent the Clinton-Obama legacy of triangulating against the powerful Republican establishment is slowing the Democrats down here and the leadership down. They don't understand how things have changed. And what's the use of keeping the House if you throw away the rule of law?
Look, why are we here though? It's because, as what I said in the lead, we have a Republican Party that just said, no, it's all about partisanship. And here's again, if you want to look at this crassly politically, create the wedge, force more votes. Republicans are going to be siding with Putin and Trump, and in 2 years, those votes with Putin and Trump might look terrible.
They might look bad 6 months later.
That's right. They might look bad in 6 days.
I do think the downside of going ahead with the impeachment inquiry is very limited politically. People wildly overinterpreted the meaning of 1998 and the Clinton impeachment when the
White House 2 years later.
Republicans did win the White House and held both houses of Congress. So it wasn't like, ooh, that was the worst thing that ever happened to the party. I think they shouldn't do it for political reasons, but be so transparently calculating about what we don't want to move to it because of purple districts. That is not appropriate when you're dealing with something like that.
I do have always believed that the Clintons oversold the idea that the Republican impeachment failed because they wanted to feel vindicated, and it's I think created a false memory of '98.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I've been kind of interested in to see is, or I guess it's a hypothetical, is what were to happen if we had a similar situation where the American public kind of gets a window into this process and watch it. What impact would that have on the actual public opinion on this issue? Because we've seen the polling is quite mixed.
You know what we didn't have at the Mueller, everybody says, oh, the Mueller report was brought to light. They didn't even their questions never even attempted to. You know, we never got the most damning thing in the Mueller report when you read it, or when the timelines are start to put together. Not once did we get a timeline. Not once did we get a timeline by any of the members, because that is what connects dots for people.
That's because this whole process is backwards from what happened in earlier times at Watergate and even with Clinton. You had in those times the special counsel, the independent investigator, whatever you call them, came at the end.
Yeah.
And you had the hearings that set things up at the beginning. I don't think that Sam Ervin back in the Watergate days or the people involved with Bill Clinton necessarily knew what they were going to find when they started. They didn't say, oh my God, they might fail.
The Nixon administration participated in some of them.
They didn't know.
Actually answered some subpoenas.
The Trump administration didn't know. With the overlay of election interference and that bipartisan report, I think it helps clear the way for the impeachment stuff to follow.
Well, I was just going to say, they didn't set a new bar and then said if they defy a court order. And I don't put it past this administration to test that theory of the case. Anyway, Bill, Howard, that was lively. And that I appreciate. Coming up, we've got Judiciary Committee member Jamie Raskin here to talk about the Democrats' latest moves on impeachment and hopefully react to what he just heard.
I would say we are in an impeachment investigation. And as to the results of the investigation, it could lead to articles of impeachment or it could lead to something else.
Most people think a button is just a button. That a speaker is just a speaker. Or that the journey can't be the destination. Most people haven't driven a Lincoln.
Discover the Lincoln approach to craftsmanship at the Lincoln Summer Invitation. Right now, get 0% APR on all 2019 Lincoln vehicles, plus no payments for up to 90 days. Only at your Lincoln dealer.
And here we have another burst pipe in Denmark. If you look close...
Jamie, are there any interesting photos from your trip?
Ouch. Okay. Boring. You don't need to see that. Oh, here we go. Can you believe my client Steve had never heard of a home and auto bundle or the rent-a-good bundle?
Wait, you're a lawyer?
Only licensed in Stockholm.
What is happening?
Anyway, game show, kumite, Cinderella story.
You know karate?
No, I practice Muay Thai. Completely different skill set.
See, that's funny. I thought you traded options. I'm not really a Wall Street guy. What's the hesitation?
It just feels too complicated, you know?
Well, sure, at first, but JJ can help you with that. JJ, can you break it down for this gentleman?
Hey, Ian, you know at TD Ameritrade, we can walk you through your options trade step by step until you're comfortable.
I could be up for that. That's taking options trading from Wall Street to Main Street.
Hey guys, want to play some pool?
I'm not really a pool guy. What's the hesitation?
It's just complicated. Step-by-step options trading support from TD Ameritrade. Let's get down to business. The business of road trips, adventure, and reconnecting. Modernized comfort inns and suites have been refreshed because our business is you. Get the lowest price guaranteed on all Choice Hotels when you book direct at choicehotels.com.
Why are we sneaking into the city when we could be at IHOP eating more crispy chicken?
You're chicken at IHOP? I never saw that for me.
IHOP just snuck into the chicken game. New chicken and pancakes, only $6.99.
A wealth of information. A wealth of perspective. A wealth of opportunities. That's the clarity you get from Fidelity Wealth Management. Straightforward advice, tailored recommendations, tax-efficient investing strategies,
and a dedicated advisor to help you grow and protect your wealth. Fidelity Wealth Management.
At Wayfair.com, we think that when the big stuff ships free, it's just better.
3 burgers for you, all mustard amount, cheese, and hot dogs. Amber! It's 6 after you
Oh, Wayfair has free shipping.
Game changer.
That's better. Free better.
I'm sorry.
Shop better at Wayfair.com.
Not about his job, some people got rid of it today, so I can tell you. They'll tell you when you get done.
It makes you wonder whose interest do they have in mind? The corporations or the voters who put them into that office?
Almost 80% of Americans believe that our system has been purchased by corporations.
People who can afford free speech have free speech.
Would you guys support any form of campaign finance reform?
There's always ways to make campaign finance more better than what it is today.
What's the difference between what you're describing and money laundering?
Not a whole heck of a lot. It is one big, giant swamp.
Tonight in 2020 Vision, 1 month after his poor debate performance and less than 1 week before the next debate, Biden is back to being the clear Democratic frontrunner. According to a Fox News poll, the former vice president is leading his nearest Democratic competitor, Bernie Sanders, by 18 points, 33-15. Biden and Bernie are the only two 2020 Democrats who lead President Trump in a head-to-head matchup in that Fox poll. Biden also holds a commanding lead in South Carolina, according to a new Monmouth University poll. He's up 27 points up there, 39% to 12% there. For Harris being number 2, we'll see what happens with those poll numbers next week's debate, but that shows you how resilient Biden is. What if Biden has a good debate night? Up next, speaking of debates, we're digging into the Democratic divide over impeachment. Judiciary Committee member Congressman Jamie Raskin joins me next.
Over 90% of Americans agree that we should have background checks on guns. But Congress won't act because the NRA and gun manufacturers